Welcome to another episode of the Gull Mouth Action podcast, where we take a look at all the latest goings on at Brighton and Hove Albion. I'm Mark Dunford, and this week I'm joined by Brighton writers Derren Howard, Sam Morton and Henry Bryant. After 8 games without a victory, Albion got back to winning ways and style at Norwich City in the FA Cup. We'll look back at that excellent result, plus we'll bring you the latest injury and transfer news as Brighton prepare for 2 away trips in the Premier League to Ipswich and Manchester United. You can read all the stories we're talking about with the videos and pictures online at sussexworld.co.uk/sport. And you can check out other great videos at Shots TV and on Freeview channel 262. You may also be watching on Latest TV, so thank you for tuning in. But we'll start that game at Norwich. A Jorginho Rutter brace, followed by goals from Julio Enciso and Solly March, and Seagulls a comfortable 4-0 win in the third round of the FA Cup. You were at Carrow Road, Derren. Sum that game up for us, please.
Yeah, it was all fairly comfortable, really, for Brighton in the end. And Norwich started off fairly well. They played some decent football to start with and hit the post. And Jason Steele was quite relieved to see that one come back off the post. But that was about as good as it got for Norwich in the match. And afterwards, Brighton, they were a bit more dominant. They started to control the midfield, and for a change, they were ruthless when their chances came. They took their chances well. Jorginho Rutter, as you mentioned, scored a brace, which was great for his confidence. He hasn't scored since that comeback against Tottenham back in October. So that was his first goal since then. So that was a big boost for him. But the main story really was Solly March. It was a great moment for him coming off the bench, replaced Yankuba Minte, and we just, as he has done over the years, cut in from the right and just curled this shot with the left foot into the top corner. Really lovely goal, and just a reminder of his talents. Really, it was his first goal since 2023. Since before this sort of really bad ACL injury. And Fabian Herzella spoke afterwards as well about him, about his character, and about how he's, how his comeback has been. And it was just a really nice story from the day. And hopefully he can kick on now and, make further contributions throughout the season. Because I think Brighton are going to need him. So as they go on, just he adds that experience, he adds that class. He may not be able to start, each games in the near future, but he can certainly come on and make a difference from the bench. But yeah, all in all, a really comfortable day at Carrow Road. They progressed to the 4th round, where they will face Chelsea in the next round. So they've got Chelsea in the league, and then in the cup in quick succession coming up later next month. So yeah, one to look forward to there.
Absolutely. João Pedro was missing due to an injury picked up in training. It seemed Brighton coped without their talisman, Sam. But will we see the Brazilian star back in action soon?
Yeah, it actually seems like an ankle injury that was picked up in training is not as bad as first feared, because it did seem really bad when we heard the news. He had to have an MRI scan, and it was a real concern, obviously, with how an important player he is, that he's already missed a number of games because of injury this season, and he's just started to get a run of games together and started to show glimpses of his best. He's not obviously been the best of form, but he's still showing bits and pieces of his best form. And then he picked up this injury in training, and you kind of fear the worst, that he might be out for a prolonged period of time. But it does seem like he may be back sooner than anticipated. Hertzler provided an update this week, and he said he will make a calculated decision this weekend, against Ipswich on Thursday before obviously the game against Man United this weekend. He said, we'll have to see today if Pedro will train with the team. Then we will decide. We won't take any risks, only if it's a calculated risk and he feels well. That's the most important thing, that the player feels confident with his body. We won't do any stupid things, but we have to wait for the training today and maybe also tomorrow. And it said it's been a frustrating season so far for Pedro. He hasn't quite got into his rhythm, but he talked to him yesterday for a long time, and he's good. He's quite in a comfortable place. Pedro also put a post on Twitter after that Norwich game, and he was particularly pleased with that Solly March goal, and he also confirmed that the scan went well. So I think positive signs from what we've been hearing, and it could seem like he potentially won't start against Ipswich. He may potentially be involved from the bench, but if not, I'm sure he will be involved at the weekend at Old Trafford.
Brilliant stuff. Positive news. As Derren said, Henry, Solly March was back in the goals in a real heartwarming moment after his long-term injury. How pleasing was it to see this?
Yeah, it was a big moment for him and a big moment for Albion fans for sort of his long-awaited few returns. I mean, that was his second appearance off the bench. And it was, yeah, as Derren mentioned, back in October of 2023, Solly March suffered with the meniscus damage and a ruptured cruciate ligament after a game against Man City, out for a year and 2 months, and having 2 operations in that time. That's a lot for a player. And he was always a fan's favourite. He's been at the club for such a long time. And during the pre-match press conference before the Ipswich game, Fabian Hürzeler was saying about how pleased he was and how it's taught him a lot about Solly March as a player because of the fact that he didn't give up and he's worked really hard during this recovery period. He did also say that, as Derren mentioned, he won't be available as much sort of as a starting 11 option just yet. He doesn't want to take any risks. He doesn't want to work on emotion. Although he did say that he felt all of those emotions and even goosebumps seeing him score and watching all the fans sort of cheer his name. So, yeah, it's just a case of him improving and maybe getting a little bit more game time off the bench as each game comes. But with injuries, you never know, and he might be sort of called upon a little bit more. I'd be very surprised if Brighton were to have him included in a starting lineup soon, although there is sort of 2 games in 1 week for this sort of game week. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to with Solly March, and I mean, he's such a quality player to have. There's a lot of midfield options that Brighton have, but he is looking to become a regular starter back in the squad. And Fabian Hürzeler did reiterate that when I asked him. He said that he does want him as a regular starter, but he just doesn't want to take any risks at this time.
Yeah, you'd rather have someone coming in and being useful rather than risking them and then losing them for even longer, wouldn't you? So, yeah, absolutely. Who else stood out in the match, Derren? Great to see Russer amongst the goals, and finally a shot resulted in a goal for Enciso, and what a finish it was as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, he did well actually, Julio Enciso. It's probably one of the best games he's had in a Brighton shirt to
against Norwich. Yeah,
against Norwich. yeah. But the fundamentals of his play were very good. He was pressing well. He was working hard, and for once, his work rate sort of off the ball matched sort of what he can bring with the ball as well. He's obviously got all this skill, this guile, and he can change games in a moment. But it's this work rate off the ball, which is you don't get into Fabian Hürzeler's team unless you are putting in all that effort, and he did that against Norwich. To be fair to him, there's still a lot of transfer speculation surrounding him this window. There hasn't, that he hasn't ruled out the fact that he could go out on loan as well this January. But yeah, it was good to see him get his goal. It was a nice finish as well. He sort of stole back possession. He was pressing well, stole back possession, and then finished well from an acute angle. So it's all his own work, which was good. But he's taken 17 shots this season from 11 matches. He's known for always shooting, basically. As soon as there's a chance, he will have a shot, which can frustrate some of his teammates, but it's become quite a sort of a fun sort of thing for the fans as well. So
didn't he score that pinger against Man City? Didn't he? A couple of years ago.
Yeah.
There's a Puskas contender, that one.
Yeah, for sure. He won goal of the season, and I think since then he's always fancied his chances from any position on within the opposition's half. So. But yeah, he does like having a shot. But this time he did get on the score sheet, and I think he could be in contention for the game against Ipswich. He could be a starter there, especially with the injuries that they have at the moment. So yeah, good for Enciso. A real positive from the game against Norwich, and also for Jorginho Rutter as well that we mentioned. Although he felt the back of his thigh in the second half. He was substituted. And he'll be assessed this week ahead of the Ipswich and Manchester United matches. Both him and Yankuba Minter as well will be
it's
assessed.
The back of your thigh, your hamstring, or does he mean the back of his thigh muscle?
That was an interesting one, because usually they say, he felt his hamstring, but he didn't want to. I think they've just had so many hamstring injuries this season.
They don't want to say that again.
He was so cautious about. So he just said, he just felt the back of his thigh, which probably meant, as you say, a hamstring issue. But But yeah, so he's going to be monitored closely this week and see. But yeah, good for those two at Norwich. Yeah,
absolutely. And Albion fielded quite a strong side, didn't they, Sam? Does that show how seriously they're taking the FA Cup? And is Chelsea come a little bit early in the run for them, or would they rather have a slightly easier tie in round 4?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I think, as you say, the team was very strong against Norwich, so they clearly are taking it seriously. I think some fans were saying that it took them by surprise quite how strong Hertzler went. It did seem like he played the strongest possible 11, obviously apart from Jason Steele, was obviously the cup goalkeeper this season, and he came in for some high praise from Hertzler this week as well, and how highly he rates him and just how important he is to the squad. But I feel like, really, really strong team that really repaid that decision, obviously with the result, which is exactly what Brighton and Hertzler wanted. So I think coming up against Chelsea in the next round could potentially be a frustrating one. But Chelsea are actually hit a bit of a slump in form.
They haven't, yeah.
They have. They were a really good run, and suddenly it's all seemed to fall by the wayside a little bit. I know obviously they struck late to rescue a draw against Bournemouth in the 95th minute, which is still not the result they were after, and they're struggling to get wins at the moment. So an interesting one. Obviously, as Derren mentioned earlier, Brighton will be playing Chelsea at home twice in the space of a few days, which I don't think I've seen before, and at least in a long time. To home matches against the same opposition in consecutive games. But I feel like that will be a real test. I can imagine there'll be different Chelsea sides being played on each game. I can imagine Chelsea will want to rest some players, because I presume they would want to focus on the league and potentially get into those Champions League places. But obviously the FA Cup's still important for any club, really. And I think with Brighton, where they are in the table, I think the FA Cup could be a really good opportunity to get some silverware this season. And I think Hertzler sees it that way. I think that would be a really amazing way for his first year at the club to pick up a trophy. And Brighton have got really close in recent years. You know how close they've got to the final. Obviously losing out penalties to Man United in the semi-final recently. So I'll be looking to go one step further. And I think they have the players and the squad depth to do it, as long as they don't pick up too many injuries in the running.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, we're going to take a short break now and stay tuned as we'll discuss some Brighton injury and transfer news and look ahead to Ipswich and Man United matches. Welcome back. In sour news, defender Igor looks set to miss the rest of the season. Tell us more, Henry, and are there other injuries that we should be aware of? How much of a miss will Igor be?
Well, I think having one less defender, especially with sort of the way that Brighton have been playing, will always sort of ring alarm bells. And not to be repetitive, but it has been seen to be a hamstring injury that needed surgery, and Hertzler described it as a really big thing. So that's not good for Albion fans to hear. I mean, he has made a few individual mistakes, as a lot of Albion defenders have made in a few games, especially when we've been 2-0 up in a few occasions, where he was unable to sort of carry the ball forward, and also lost his cool a little bit in terms of keeping sort of game management. So although he's a big loss for the Albion, and he's made 48 appearances so far since his arrival in 2023, I think that it will be interesting to see if having one less defender will actually allow maybe a more consistent back line, because you've still got John-Paul Van Heck, Lewis Dunk's available, Adam Webster's also available, and he could be a big sort of part of this season, really, Adam Webster. I mean, he's been out of favour from a few mistakes sort of near the first half of the season. But with him coming back, I think that it's a big pledge for him to come back into the side. Jorginho Rutter is a little bit of a doubt at the moment because he hurt his right leg. He's expected to miss the trip to Ipswich. Yankuba Minte is also struggling, and they haven't really sort of said about what this injury is. I'm hoping it's not a hamstring injury again. But he's
I've heard it's the front of the hamstring, not the front of the hamstring. Or something.
Yeah. And then sort of João Pedro and was sort of seen as a we'll see, and that was yesterday at the press conference. That was on Tuesday the 14th. Danny Welbeck, he's an option, and he's been described as a role model by Hertzler in the last press conference, and it'd be interesting to see how Brighton fare without Igor, because he is a solid defender. He's quite an imposing figure at the back, and it will be a big miss, but it could turn out well for the likes of Adam Webster that's sort of coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. And how are things looking on the transfer front, Derren? Any incomes or outgoings we should expect? Sounds like Manchester City pipped them to one target, doesn't it?
They did. Yes, yeah. Brighton were really keen on this Vitor Reis, he's 18-year-old Brazilian defender from Palmeiras, and they made 3 bids for him. I think that the final bid was around about 25 million that Brighton made for Reis. They were really pushing hard to bring him in, but unfortunately, if Manchester City come calling, it's tough to say no to them in favour of Brighton, and they offered a bit more money. They offered 30 million. It looks like it's a done deal as well. There's just the final details now. So Vitor Reis is on his way to Manchester City rather than Brighton, which is a blow for them. Really, they really worked hard on that deal. So they'll have to go back to the drawing board and look at perhaps a new defender coming in this window. Because as Henry mentioned, that the injury to Igor leaves them a little bit short in defensive areas. I don't envisage too much more in terms of income. In the squad is quite big as it is. They obviously spent the 200 million last summer, which many of those players haven't featured due to injuries as well. So we haven't seen the best of what they bought last summer as yet. So I don't expect there to be too much more in terms of incomings. Outgoings, Evan Ferguson continues to be linked with a loan move away. Again, Herzella yesterday refused to rule out him going out on loan as well, which is a change of stance from Herzella. Previously, he said, I love him, I want him in the squad, but he hasn't been playing him. Yeah, but yesterday his stance seemed to soften a bit, and he seemed a bit more open to a move for Ferguson and Enciso. West Ham have been the club linked the most recently, with obviously Graham Potter's linked to Evan Ferguson as well. So West Ham badly need a striker with Antonio injured, and then Nicholas Fulcrum, he's not too injured his hamstring as well, another hamstring. Jacob Moder and Tarek Lamptey, both of those are out of contract in the summer, so worth keeping an eye on those two between now and the end of the transfer window as well. This will be the last opportunity that Brighton will have of receiving a transfer fee for either of those two. I think Moder will probably go. Lamptey, I think he will stay, and then it's a decision to see whether they offer him a new contract in the summer.
Cool. Excellent. Right, we've got to speed things up a little bit, running out of time. Danny Welbeck was back in the squad at Norwich. Could we see him start against Ipswich or Manchester United, Sam? And how much has he been missed?
Yeah, he's been a huge miss. He's obviously been such an important player for Brighton this season, obviously playing some of his best football in his career. His injury came at a really bad time. He's missed a chunk of the season, and it's kind of coincided with this poor run of form for Brighton. They've struggled to get any points, any wins in the league, I should say, and lots of draws, obviously 8 without a win. So I feel like they'll be really, really keen to get him back into the team. Obviously, he came on as a sub at Norwich, which is really great that he can be back in the fold. And obviously, as Derren's mentioned with Rutter potentially not being fit, I wouldn't be surprised to see Welbeck start, because obviously I don't think Pedro will. So I think maybe they might start Welbeck. I think in an ideal world, they'd probably want to keep him on the bench for one more game and manage his minutes as he obviously recovers. And I think he would be desperate to play against Man United, his former team, at the weekend, because we know he loves a goal against Man United. And he still remains the top scorer for Brighton with 6 goals. Pedro's just behind on 5. And then after that, it's Matoma on 3. So I think you can see how important Welbeck is. Even after the number of games he's missed, he still remains the top scorer. So I feel like hopefully he can hit the ground running as he returns to the team, whether that be against Ipswich or Man United.
Yeah, and Diego Gomez could be involved. Henry, how excited are you to see him in action?
Well, I think for Albion fans, it could be a breath of fresh air, because there have been some issues at the back. And I mean, when you sell your most experienced midfielder in the likes of Pascal Gross to Borussia Dortmund, although they were knocking and other teams were knocking, and you probably did want to return to Germany, it leaves a lot of issues. Brighton are known for selling their midfielders. I mean, McAllister, Caicedo, for example. But at the moment, I think they have really struggled, not just defensively, but also in the midfield, just keeping the ball and maintaining it. And I think that Diego Gomez could be the sort of player that Brighton need at this time. He's a young player. He's 21 years old, and he's not got loads of experience behind his belt in terms of sort of first team football, in terms of the amount of clubs he's played for. So he's got Libertad in Paraguay and Inter Miami that everyone knows in the USA, and he's played alongside Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, and he's had 24 appearances there, scoring 4 goals. But I think if Hasler is backing him and thinks that he's going to be starting and making a big impact from the off, then clearly this young talent might be what Brighton needs. So it's going to be really interesting to see what he's like, and if he's sort of sure of himself and confident and make sure that he sort of hits the ground running in the right way in the Premier League, then he might be a regular starter for the Albion and keep it consistent in midfield.
Excellent, yeah. And on Thursday night, Derren, you're going to Ipswich. How do you see this one going? A bit of split loyalties for you here, isn't it?
Yeah, they're going to the best stadium atmosphere in the Premier League this on Thursday. So it's my team Ipswich. They've obviously struggled for points, struggling to pick up points, but they're looking a bit more solid lately. They're unlucky. They were leading against Fulham and then just threw that away in the last seconds at Fulham for a draw. They got a win against Chelsea at home. So it won't be an easy place to go. Calvin Phillips is just starting to pick up a bit of form for Ipswich as well. So, and obviously they've got the Liam Delap up front, who's been excellent, and Herzella singled him out for some special praise in the press conference yesterday as well. So it won't be easy place to go for Brighton. I think maybe if it depends on what team Brighton can put out with the injuries, but they're going to be up against it. I think that's for sure.
Absolutely. And you're off to Old Trafford on Sunday, Sam. I listened to another football podcast, and I think Brighton have missed their opportunity to cash in their Man United voucher, because Man United seem quite a tough team to beat now based on their last 2 games against Liverpool and Arsenal. How do you see it sort of going there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Brighton will be a bit wary of the upturn in form. I think Man United has suddenly become really organised defensively. They're obviously Ruben Amorim's come in and had some terrible results to start off his time as manager, and he's now started to get his ideas across to the players, and they've now started to grind out some really hard-working performances. We saw it against Liverpool, where they probably should have won with the big chance they had at the end. They did really well there. And then obviously against Arsenal in the FA Cup, they played with 10 men for just over an hour, and they still managed to hold out for penalties and get the win there. So there's definitely been some signs of improvement, some signs of life for the first time in a long time from those Man United players. And Brighton will be wary of that. But I still think it's a game they should be targeting, because Man United is still well down there in the table, 14th, just 7 points above the relegation zone as things stand.
Crazy,
so when you look, mental. So when you look at that, Brighton will be looking at this game as an opportunity to finally pick up some points and win the Premier League. And they know they have a brilliant record against Man United. And Welbeck coming back, who's almost guaranteed a goal at Old Trafford, then they always stand a good chance.
Wonderful. Right, we'll quickly do the score predictions. So Ipswich tomorrow night. Derren, who are you going for?
I'm going to go for a 2-2 for that one. I'm going to sit on the fence nicely for that one and say a 2-2. Yeah, I think Liam Delap will be on target for Ipswich as well.
Yeah, I was going to go 1-1 actually, so I'll go with you there. Sam?
Yeah, tough game. Ipswich need the points to get out of the relegation zone, and I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw as well.
Yeah, Henry?
I'm going to say 2-1. Danny Welbeck with 2 to break the Tractor Boys' hearts.
And then Man United on Sunday. This is the Sam Morton derby. Sam, how do you think this is going?
It's a really tough one. I just think from Brighton's form, they're going to go and win 2-1. Form against Man United, I should say. With the way they obviously do love a win against Man United, I think they'll go and get a 2-1 win there.
Excellent. Henry?
I think this one will be 2-2, and I'm going to say Danny Welbeck to get 1, not 2. 4 goals in 1 week would be crazy. But, yeah. And
Derren?
Yeah, Man United are a bit better these days, but I'm still not convinced by Man United. So I think Brighton are going to go there and win 2-0.
I'm going to go Man United 1-0. A really boring game. Right. Thank you very much, chaps. You can catch up with all the latest sports covering, news covering everything we talked about today at sussexworld.co.uk. And you can watch more excellent videos on shotstv.com and Freeview Channel 262. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.